What would you do if you saw someone you swore to protect falling to their death? Would you think about your own safety, or would instinct take over? In the grand halls of Aldermere Palace, where marble steps stretch endlessly downward and family secrets run deeper than the castle's foundations, one moment changed everything. A single push, a desperate dive, a loyalty tested beyond all limits. This is the story of Captain Marcus Blackwood, a man whose oath meant more than his life, and Princess Isabel, a 12-year-old girl caught between a stepmother's jealousy and a father's blind trust. In a world where crowns come with curses and family dinners can turn deadly, sometimes the only thing standing between innocence and evil is one brave soul willing to fall. What really happened on those stone steps that autumn morning? The official palace report spoke of an accident. The servants whispered of something far more sinister. But only 3 people knew the truth, and one of them would never be the same again. Prepare yourself for a tale of courage, betrayal, and the price of protecting those we love. Sometimes heroes don't wear shining armor. Sometimes they wear simple uniforms and carry nothing but an unbreakable promise in their hearts. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Aldermere Palace as Captain Marcus Blackwood adjusted his midnight blue uniform for what would be the last time in his 30-year career. At 52, his weathered face told stories of countless battles fought not with swords, but with patience, diplomacy, and an unwavering sense of duty. The silver threads in his dark hair caught the light streaming through the tall windows as he walked the familiar corridors he had protected for 3 decades. Marcus had served 3 generations of the Aldermere royal family. He remembered when King Edmund was just a rebellious prince, sneaking out of the palace to court the baker's daughter. He had been there when Queen Isabella died in childbirth, leaving behind a heartbroken king and a beautiful baby girl who would grow up without knowing her mother's gentle touch. And he had watched, with growing unease, as King Edmund married Lady Catherine Morgrave just 2 years later, bringing her sharp ambitions and calculating smile into the warm halls of Aldermere. The palace buzzed with its usual morning activity. Servants hurried through the corridors carrying breakfast trays, fresh linens, and the day's correspondence. The smell of baking bread drifted from the kitchens, mixing with the scent of fresh flowers that Lady Catherine insisted be changed daily in every room. Everything appeared normal, peaceful even, but Marcus felt a familiar knot of tension in his stomach that had been growing stronger with each passing month. Princess Isabel Aurora Aldermere was now 12 years old, a bright and spirited girl with her mother's golden hair and her father's kind blue eyes. She had inherited more than just her parents' good looks. She possessed an intelligence that sometimes startled adults and a compassion that drew people to her like moths to a flame. The palace staff adored her. The people of the kingdom spoke her name with genuine affection, and foreign dignitaries often commented on her remarkable maturity and grace. But it was precisely these qualities that made Lady Catherine's eyes narrow with something that went far beyond mere stepmother jealousy. Marcus paused at the portrait gallery, his eyes lingering on the painting of Queen Isabella holding baby Isabel. The artist had captured something ethereal in the late queen's expression, a mixture of infinite love and prophetic sadness, as if she somehow knew she would not be there to guide her daughter through the challenges that lay ahead. Below the portrait, someone had placed fresh white roses, Isabel's daily tribute to the mother she barely remembered but desperately missed. "She looks just like her, doesn't she?" a soft voice said behind him. Marcus turned to find Princess Isabel approaching, her school books tucked under her arm. Even at 12, she carried herself with a natural grace that came from royal breeding. But there's also something wonderfully unguarded about her, a childlike enthusiasm that Lady Catherine seemed determined to crush. "Indeed she does, Your Highness," Marcus replied, offering a small bow. "You have your mother's eyes and her generous heart." Isabel smiled, but Marcus noticed the shadows under her eyes that had become more pronounced in recent weeks. "I dreamed about her again last night. She was trying to warn me about something, but I couldn't understand what she was saying. The knot in Marcus's stomach tightened. In his years of service, he had learned to trust his instincts, and every instinct he possessed was screaming that danger was approaching the young princess like a storm on the horizon. Dreams can be troubling, Your Highness, but they're just our minds trying to make sense of our worries. Your mother loved you more than life itself, and that love surrounds you always. Marcus, Isabel said, using the informal address she employed when they were alone. Do you think Catherine really wants me to go away to boarding school? The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had heard the rumors, of course. Palace gossip traveled faster than wildfire. But to hear it confirmed by Isabel herself made his blood run cold. Sending the future queen away during these crucial years of her education and development would be more than just educational. It would be strategic. With Isabel gone, Lady Catherine would have unfettered access to King Edmund's ear and could begin positioning herself and any future children as the true heirs to the throne. That's not a decision I'm privy to, Your Highness, Marcus said carefully, but I know your father loves you deeply and wants what's best for your future. But what if what Catherine thinks is best isn't actually what's best for me? Isabel's voice carried a wisdom that should have belonged to someone much older. Sometimes I feel like she looks at me and sees an obstacle rather than a daughter. Marcus knelt down to Isabel's eye level, something he had done since she was small enough to hide behind his legs during formal ceremonies. Princess Isabel, I want you to remember something very important. You are the rightful heir to this kingdom. You are loved by your people, respected by your tutors, and cherished by everyone who truly knows you. No one can change who you are or diminish your worth. Will you always be here to remind me of that? She asked, and the vulnerability in her voice nearly broke his heart. I will protect you with my life, Marcus said, and the words carried the weight of a sacred oath. That is my promise to you, to your mother's memory, and to this kingdom. As they spoke, neither noticed the figure watching from the shadows at the end of the corridor. Lady Catherine Moregrave stood perfectly still, her elegant green dress blending with the dark tapestries that adorned the walls. Her beautiful face, which had captivated King Edmund and convinced him she could fill the void left by his beloved Isabella, was twisted with an expression of pure hatred. Catherine had worked too hard and sacrificed too much to let a 12-year-old girl stand between her and ultimate power. She had endured 2 years of playing the doting stepmother, of pretending to care for Edmund's precious daughter, of smiling through family dinners while plotting her next move. The boarding school plan was just the beginning, a way to remove Isabel from the daily life of the palace and begin the process of making her irrelevant. But first, she needed to deal with Captain Marcus Blackwood. The man was too perceptive, too loyal to the memory of the dead queen, and too protective of the little princess. Catherine had suggested to Edmund several times that perhaps it was time for a younger captain of the guard, someone more aligned with the new direction of the monarchy. But Edmund had refused, stating that Marcus was like family and would serve until he chose to retire. Catherine's lips curved into a smile that would have chilled anyone who saw it. If Marcus Blackwood wouldn't step aside voluntarily, then perhaps circumstances could be arranged to force his removal permanently. The rest of that morning passed in a blur of routine activities. Marcus conducted his usual security briefings, reviewed the guard rotations, and inspected the palace defenses. He attended the mandatory staff meeting where Lady Catherine announced several new safety protocols that seemed designed more to limit Isabel's freedom than protect her. He noticed how the other servants kept their eyes downcast when Catherine spoke, how the joy seemed to drain from rooms when she entered them. At lunch, Marcus observed the family dynamic with growing concern. King Edmund, once vibrant and engaged, seemed tired and distracted. He barely looked up from his correspondence as Lady Catherine dominated the conversation, speaking about various social events and political connections she was cultivating. Isabel sat quietly, picking at her food, occasionally glancing at her father, as if hoping he might notice her distress. Isabella, "Darling," Lady Catherine said with false sweetness, "I've been thinking more about our conversation regarding your education. I believe a change of environment would be beneficial for your development. The Academy of St. Celeste in Switzerland has an excellent reputation for preparing young ladies for their future roles. I'm quite happy with my tutors here," Isabel replied carefully. "And I'm learning so much about the kingdom's history and the responsibilities I'll have someday. Oh, but there's so much more to being a proper royal than just local knowledge," Catherine continued, her voice dripping with condescension. "You need to understand international protocols, develop relationships with other noble families, and learn the sophisticated skills that will serve you well in diplomatic situations." King Edmund finally looked up from his papers. "Catherine raises valid points, Isabel. Perhaps we should consider expanding your educational opportunities." Marcus watched as hope died in the young princess's eyes. She had counted on her father to protect her, to see through Catherine's manipulations, but Edmund seemed genuinely convinced that his new wife had only Isabel's best interests at heart. "Of course, father," Isabel said quietly. "Whatever you think is best." That afternoon, Marcus found himself walking the palace ramparts, trying to clear his head and plan his next move. The autumn wind carried the scent of burning leaves and the distant sound of children playing in the village below. Soon, those same children would grow up to serve under Queen Isabel's reign, if she was allowed to claim her birthright. His contemplation was interrupted by the arrival of Sir William Hartwell, his second-in-command and closest friend within the guard. William was 10 years younger than Marcus, with sandy hair and keen green eyes that missed nothing. He had proven himself in several dangerous situations and had earned Marcus's complete trust. "Marcus, we need to talk," William said, glancing around to ensure they were alone. "Some of the staff are talking. There are rumors about Lady Catherine's plans for the princess, and they go far beyond boarding school." "What kind of rumors?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew. "The kind that suggests Princess Isabel might face more than just educational displacement," William said carefully. "Cook mentioned that Catherine has been asking detailed questions about the princess's daily routines, her favorite places in the palace, her exercise habits. And the stable master said she's been inquiring about which horses Isabel prefers to ride and which trail she usually takes." Marcus felt ice form in his veins. That could be innocent motherly interest. "Could be," William agreed. "But combined with her pushing for increased isolation and removal from the palace, it paints a concerning picture. And there's something else. Catherine has been meeting secretly with Lord Aldrich Morgrave, her nephew. He's been staying in the East Wing for the past week, ostensibly visiting family, but he's been asking the guard about security protocols and palace layouts. Lord Aldrich Morgrave was known throughout the kingdom as a man of questionable morals and dangerous ambitions. If Catherine was involving him in her plans, then the situation was far more serious than Marcus had imagined. "We need evidence," Marcus said finally. "Suspicions and rumors won't be enough to convince the king, especially when they involve his beloved wife." "I've been thinking the same thing," William replied. "But we also need to ensure Princess Isabel's immediate safety. If something is being planned, it could happen at any time." As if summoned by their conversation, a commotion arose from the courtyard below. They looked down to see Princess Isabel walking with her afternoon tutor, heading toward the library wing of the palace. Even from their elevated position, they could see her animated gestures as she discussed whatever lesson they had been working on. But they also saw Lady Catherine watching from a second-floor window, her expression calculating and cold. "Double the guard rotations around the princess's quarters," Marcus ordered. "And I want someone watching those East Wing meetings between Catherine and her nephew. If they're planning something, we need to know about it before it's too late." That evening, as the palace settled into its nighttime routine, Marcus made his own rounds personally rather than delegating them to his subordinates. He checked every door, every window, every possible entrance or exit that could be used for purposes other than their intended function. The palace that had been his home for 30 years suddenly felt like enemy territory, full of shadows and hidden threats. When he finally retired to his quarters, Marcus found a note slipped under his door. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, and carried an ominous message. Captain Blackwood, your services to this family have been exemplary, but perhaps it's time to consider that loyalties must evolve with changing circumstances. Some attachments to the past can become dangerous to the future. A friend who wishes you well. There was no signature, but Marcus didn't need one. The message was clear: step aside or face the consequences. He walked to his window and looked out over the moonlit gardens where young Isabel often played. Somewhere in this palace, plans were being made that would determine not just the fate of one innocent girl, but the future of the entire kingdom. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, and new tests of the oath he had sworn so many years ago. Marcus Blackwood had never backed down from a fight in his life, and he wasn't about to start now. Whatever Lady Catherine and her allies were planning, they would have to go through him first. And that, he vowed silently to the memory of Queen Isabella and the future of her precious daughter, would not be an easy task. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change everything, and Marcus could only hope that when the moment of truth arrived, he would be ready to pay whatever price was necessary to keep his promise to protect the princess he had watched grow from infant to young woman. Little did he know that tomorrow would test that promise in ways he had never imagined possible. Dawn broke gray and cold over Aldermere Palace, casting everything in shades of silver and shadow that seemed to reflect the ominous mood settling over the ancient stones. Marcus woke before his usual time, disturbed by dreams of falling figures and desperate reaching hands. The threatening note lay on his bedside table, where he had placed it the night before, its elegant script seeming to mock him in the pale morning light. As he dressed in his ceremonial uniform, today was the feast of Saint Aldermere, the patron saint of the kingdom. Marcus reviewed everything he knew about Lady Catherine's background. She had appeared in court 2 years ago, as if from nowhere, claiming to be the widow of a minor lord from the northern provinces. Her beauty and charm had quickly captivated the grieving King Edmund, who had been desperately lonely since Queen Isabella's death. But Marcus had always wondered about the convenient timing of her arrival and the suspicious lack of detailed records about her previous life. The Feast of St. Aldermere was one of the kingdom's most important celebrations, involving elaborate ceremonies, formal presentations, and a grand procession through the palace's most magnificent halls. It was also, Marcus realized with growing alarm, the perfect opportunity for someone to stage an accident amid the chaos and crowds. His fears proved justified when he arrived at the morning security briefing to find that Lady Catherine had made several last-minute changes to the day's schedule. Princess Isabel would now be participating in a special ceremony on the grand staircase. The magnificent marble construction that descended over 100 steps from the palace's upper levels to the main reception hall. The staircase was a masterpiece of architecture, but it was also treacherous, with smooth marble steps that could become slippery and railings that, while ornate, were not designed for safety. Sir William, Marcus called his second-in-command aside after the briefing. I want you to personally inspect every inch of that staircase. Check for loose stones, slippery substances, anything that could cause a fall. William's face grew grave as he understood the implications. You think they're planning to use the ceremony as cover? I think today presents too many opportunities for someone with malicious intent, Marcus replied grimly. And I want you to position guards at strategic points throughout the procession route. If something happens, I need witnesses who can't be easily silenced or intimidated. As the morning progressed, Marcus observed Lady Catherine with the intensity of a hawk watching potential prey. She moved through the palace with unusual energy, personally overseeing arrangements that were normally left to the household staff. She paid particular attention to the positioning of decorative elements along the grand staircase, insisting that certain flower arrangements be moved to create what she called better visual balance. More concerning was the presence of Lord Aldrich Morgrave, who had somehow secured an invitation to participate in the ceremony despite having no official role in the royal household. Aldrich was a tall, lean man with predatory eyes and a smile that never reached them. He wore his noble title like a weapon, using it to intimidate servants and gain access to areas where he didn't belong. Marcus encountered Aldrich near the grand staircase around midday, ostensibly inspecting the ceremonial decorations, but actually studying the architecture with the eye of someone planning something sinister. "Lord Morgrave," Marcus said with formal courtesy, "I wasn't aware you had an official role in today's ceremonies." Aldrich's cold smile widened. "Captain Blackwood, always so concerned with protocols and procedures. My dear Aunt Catherine thought I might enjoy witnessing the princess's participation in such an important tradition. Family should support family, don't you think?" "Indeed," Marcus replied evenly. "And I'm sure Princess Isabel appreciates having so many people concerned with her welfare." The menace in Aldrich's eyes became unmistakable. "The princess is fortunate to have such dedicated guardians, though I sometimes wonder if excessive protection might actually put a young person in greater danger. After all, accidents can happen to anyone, even those who think themselves untouchable." Before Marcus could respond, Aldrich melted away into the crowd of courtiers and servants preparing for the afternoon ceremony. The threat had been delivered with aristocratic subtlety, but its meaning was crystal clear. Marcus found Princess Isabel in her chambers, being prepared for the ceremony by her lady-in-waiting, Mary, a kind woman in her 40s who had served the royal family since before Isabel's birth. The princess wore a gorgeous gown of deep blue silk adorned with the silver emblem of House Aldermere and a delicate tiara that had belonged to her mother. She looked every inch the future queen, but Marcus could see the anxiety in her young eyes. "Your Highness," he said with a formal bow, "I wanted to review the afternoon's procedures with you personally." Isabel dismissed Mary with a gentle nod, then turned to Marcus with obvious relief. "I'm so glad you're here. Catherine has been acting strangely all morning, and I can't shake the feeling that something isn't right." "What kind of strange behavior?" Marcus asked, his protective instincts sharpening. "She keeps asking me about my dress, about how comfortable my shoes are, about whether I'm nervous walking on marble stairs in formal wear. And she insisted on changing my position in the procession so that I'll be walking directly behind her instead of beside Father." Marcus felt the familiar ice in his veins. In the traditional ceremony, the royal family walked together as a unit, symbolizing their unity and shared commitment to the kingdom. By isolating Isabel behind her, Catherine would have the perfect opportunity to create a situation where the princess might stumble or fall. "Your Highness, I need you to listen to me very carefully," Marcus said, his voice low and urgent. "During today's ceremony, I want you to stay alert and be prepared to react quickly if anything unusual happens. Keep your hand on the railing at all times when we're on the staircase, and if you feel yourself losing balance for any reason, don't try to catch yourself. Just fall sideways toward the center of the steps rather than forward." Isabel's face paled. "Marcus, you're scaring me. What do you think is going to happen?" "I hope nothing at all," he said honestly, "but I've learned to prepare for possibilities rather than hoping for the best. You're precious to this kingdom and to everyone who loves you. I just want to make sure you stay safe. Will you be nearby during the ceremony?" "I'll be close enough to help if you need me," Marcus promised, though he knew that palace protocol would keep him at a distance that might prove critical if something happened quickly. The afternoon ceremony began with all the pomp and grandeur that the kingdom's most important celebration deserved. Hundreds of nobles, clergy, and dignitaries filled the palace's grand reception areas. Their colorful formal were creating a kaleidoscope of luxury and power. The scent of incense mixed with expensive perfumes filled the air, while musicians played the ancient hymns that had accompanied this ceremony for centuries. King Edmund looked magnificent in his ceremonial robes, the crown of Aldermere catching the light as he moved. But Marcus noticed that he seemed distracted, his attention focused more on the political conversations he was having with various lords and ambassadors than on the ceremony itself or his daughter's participation in it. Lady Catherine was resplendent in emerald green silk that matched her calculating eyes. She moved through the crowd like a predator in paradise, accepting compliments and engaging in the kind of diplomatic small talk that built alliances and destroyed enemies. But Marcus saw how her gaze kept returning to Princess Isabel with an expression that made his blood run cold. The procession began in the palace's upper chambers, with the royal family and their closest advisors leading a formal parade through the most important rooms of the palace. Princess Isabel walked with perfect poise, acknowledging the bows and curtsies of the assembled nobles with grace beyond her 12 years. But Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders and the way she kept glancing around as if expecting danger to materialize from the shadows. As they approached the grand staircase, Marcus positioned himself as close to the royal family as protocol would allow. Sir William had taken a position at the bottom of the stairs, while other trusted guards were stationed at various points along the route. If something was going to happen, they would be as ready as possible. The grand staircase was truly magnificent, its marble steps gleaming in the afternoon light that streamed through the tall stained glass windows. Carved stone railings depicted the history of House Aldermere, with intricate scenes of battles won, alliances forged, and prosperity achieved. But today, all Marcus could see was the danger, the smooth stone that could become treacherous, the height that could prove fatal, the crowd that could provide cover for malicious action. King Edmund began the ceremonial descent first, his steps measured and dignified. Behind him, Lady Catherine followed with practiced grace, her emerald gown flowing elegantly as she navigated the stairs. And behind her, exactly as Catherine had arranged, walked Princess Isabel. Marcus watched every step, his heart pounding as they descended. 20 steps, 30, 40, everything seemed normal. Perhaps his fears had been unfounded. Perhaps Catherine's strange behavior had innocent explanations. Perhaps it happened so quickly that most witnesses would later claim they didn't see exactly what occurred. One moment, Princess Isabel was walking carefully down the stairs, her hand trailing along the ornate railing. The next moment, Lady Catherine had suddenly stopped and stepped backward, as if she had forgotten something or needed to speak to Isabel about their positioning. But Marcus saw it clearly. He saw Catherine's hand come up in what looked like a gentle gesture, as if she was reaching out to steady the young princess. He saw the subtle but unmistakable push that sent Isabel stumbling backward, her feet tangling in her formal gown as she lost her balance completely. Time seemed to slow as Princess Isabel began to fall backward down the marble stairs. Her eyes went wide with terror and surprise, her hands reaching desperately for anything that might break her fall. The assembled nobles gasped in horror as they realized what was happening, but they were too far away to help, too shocked to react quickly enough. Marcus didn't think. 30 years of training and an unbreakable oath took over his actions. He launched himself forward, pushing through the crowd of startled courtiers with the desperate strength of a man who had only seconds to save a life. The ceremonial sword at his side clattered against the marble as he ran, his boots struggling for purchase on the smooth stone. Isabel was falling fast, her small body tumbling helplessly down the unforgiving stairs. Marcus could see that she was trying to follow his earlier advice, attempting to fall toward the center rather than rolling dangerously down the edge, but the momentum of her fall was carrying her toward the outer rail where 100-foot drop awaited anyone who went over. With a final desperate lunge, Marcus threw himself down the stairs after her. His hands reached out, grasping for any part of her clothing, her outstretched arms, anything that might stop her deadly descent. He felt his fingers close around her wrist just as she reached the most dangerous part of the staircase, where the ancient railing was lowest and the drop was steepest. But his momentum carried him forward as well. As he caught Princess Isabel, his own body slammed into the marble steps with bone-crushing force. He felt ribs crack, felt his shoulders separate, felt the sharp edge of a stone carving tear across his face. But he held on to the princess with desperate strength, using his own body to cushion her fall and break her deadly momentum. They crashed together in a tangle of torn silk and blood-stained marble. Marcus's larger frame taking the worst of the impact as they finally came to rest about 20 steps from the bottom of the grand staircase. The assembled crowd erupted in screams and shouts as they realized the full scope of what had just happened. Marcus lay still for a moment, his body screaming with pain, but his mind focused on one crucial question. Was Princess Isabel alive? He could feel her small form pressed against him, could hear her ragged breathing, could see her golden hair stained with blood from various cuts and scrapes. "Isabel," he whispered urgently. "Can you hear me?" Her blue eyes fluttered open, dazed and frightened, but beautifully, wonderfully alive. "Marcus," she whispered back. I think she pushed me." "I know," he replied grimly, trying to assess the extent of their injuries. "I saw it too." Around them, chaos reigned as palace guards and medical personnel rushed to their aid. Marcus could hear King Edmund's voice shouting orders, could hear Lady Catherine's carefully modulated cries of concern and dismay. But he also heard something else. Lord Aldrich Morgrave's voice, cold and calculating, suggesting that perhaps the captain of the guard had been careless, had somehow caused the accident he was supposedly trying to prevent. As gentle hands began to lift Princess Isabel away from him, Marcus managed to catch her eye one more time. "Remember," he said quietly, his voice growing weaker as shock and pain began to take their toll. "You are the rightful heir. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Medical attendants surrounded them both, but Marcus could see Lady Catherine pushing through the crowd, her face a mask of concern that didn't quite hide the fury in her eyes. She had failed today, but Marcus knew this was only the beginning. His dramatic intervention had saved Isabel's life, but it had also confirmed that someone was actively trying to harm her. As consciousness began to fade, Marcus realized that everything had changed. The game was now in the open, and the next moves would determine not just Isabel's fate, but the future of the entire kingdom. He had kept his promise to protect her today, but what would happen tomorrow when his injuries made him vulnerable and Catherine had time to plan her next attack? The grand staircase of Aldermere Palace had witnessed many ceremonies over the centuries, but none as dramatic or consequential as this one. As Marcus slipped into unconsciousness, his last thought was a prayer to Queen Isabella's spirit, that somehow, someway, her daughter would find the strength to survive the trials that lay ahead. The palace infirmary had never seen such commotion as it did in the hours following the incident on the grand staircase. Dr. Helena Ashworth, the kingdom's most skilled physician, worked frantically to treat both Marcus and Princess Isabel while navigating the political storm that raged around her patients. The infirmary, usually a quiet sanctuary devoted to healing, had become the epicenter of a battle for the very soul of the kingdom. Princess Isabel lay in the bed closest to the window, her young face pale against the white linens, but her spirit unbroken. Despite suffering a concussion, several deep cuts, and extensive bruising, she had been incredibly fortunate. Dr. Ashworth attributed her survival to Captain Blackwood's heroic intervention, though she kept this medical opinion to herself as various nobles and officials came to visit. Marcus occupied the bed beside her, his injuries far more severe. 3 broken ribs, a dislocated shoulder, a deep gash across his left temple, and extensive internal bruising painted a picture of a man who had willingly sacrificed his body to save another's life. Dr. Ashworth had been particularly concerned about potential internal bleeding, but after a tense night of monitoring, she was cautiously optimistic that he would recover fully, given time and proper care. What concerned her more was the political pressure she was facing to alter her medical reports. "Dr. Ashworth," Lady Catherine's voice carried the false sweetness that had become her trademark. "I hope you understand how important it is that we get an accurate account of what happened yesterday. The kingdom needs to understand that this was a terrible accident, nothing more." The physician looked up from her notes, her gray eyes sharp with intelligence and suspicion. Dr. Ashworth had served the royal family for over 20 years, and she had learned to read between the lines of political speak. "My lady, I can only report what I observe medically. The pattern of injuries, the physical evidence, and the accounts from the patients themselves will inform my official statement." "Of course," Catherine replied smoothly, "but surely you understand that wild accusations and conspiracy theories would be damaging to the kingdom's stability. Princess Isabel has suffered a traumatic experience, and trauma can sometimes cause the mind to create false memories or misinterpret innocent events." Dr. Ashworth's jaw tightened. "Are you suggesting that I should ignore my patients' statements about their own experiences?" "I'm suggesting that a wise physician considers all factors when making assessments, including the broader implications of their conclusions." The threat was delicately delivered, but unmistakable. Dr. Ashworth had seen enough court intrigue to recognize when someone was trying to buy her silence or compliance. "My medical oath requires me to serve my patient's best interests, Lady Catherine. That will always be my primary concern." After Catherine left, clearly frustrated by the doctor's refusal to be intimidated, Dr. Ashworth found herself wondering how many other people were being pressured to change their stories or remain silent about what they had witnessed. Sir William Hartwell was discovering the answer to that question through his own investigation. As acting captain of the guard while Marcus recovered, William had taken it upon himself to interview everyone who had been present during the ceremony. What he found disturbed him deeply. Several nobles who had been standing near the royal family claimed they had seen nothing unusual. Lady Catherine had simply been walking ahead of the princess when the poor girl lost her footing. They spoke in carefully rehearsed phrases that sounded suspiciously similar, as if they had been coached. But the servants told a different story when William could convince them to speak at all. A young page named Thomas had been carrying ceremonial items near the staircase, and swore he had seen Lady Catherine deliberately step backward and push the princess. A lady's maid named Sarah claimed she had witnessed what looked like an intentional shove. However, both servants were clearly terrified and begged William not to record their statements officially. "Please, sir," Thomas whispered when William interviewed him in a storage room away from prying ears, "I have a family to feed. If Lady Catherine discovers I said anything against her, we'll all be turned out with no references. Who would believe a page's word against a lady's anyway?" William understood their fear, but it left him with a terrible dilemma. He had testimony that suggested attempted murder, but from witnesses too frightened to go on record. Meanwhile, the official version of events was being shaped by people who were either complicit in Catherine's plans or too intimidated to speak the truth. The political ramifications became even clearer when King Edmund finally visited the infirmary on the second day after the incident. William watched through the partially open door as the king approached his daughter's bedside with genuine concern and affection, but also with obvious exhaustion and confusion. "My dear Isabel," the king said gently, taking her small hand in his larger one, "I'm so sorry this happened to you. Catherine and I have been beside ourselves with worry." Princess Isabel looked at her father with eyes that seemed far older than her 12 years. "Father, I need to tell you something about what happened on the stairs. The physicians say you suffer a concussion, sweetheart. Sometimes head injuries can make memories confused or unclear. The important thing is that you're safe now." "But, father, I remember clearly." "Catherine, Princess Isabel," Lady Catherine's voice interrupted as she swept into the infirmary with Lord Aldrich beside her. "You shouldn't tire yourself with trying to remember traumatic events. The mind's way of protecting us from painful memories is to let them fade." William watched as Isabel's face closed off, her natural intelligence recognizing that she was outnumbered and overpowered in this conversation. The girl was learning harsh lessons about how power operated in the real world. "Perhaps," Catherine continued, "it would be best if we focused on your recovery and getting you settled in your new school. A change of environment might help you put this unfortunate accident behind you." "New school?" King Edmund looked confused. "I thought we had decided to postpone that discussion." "My dear Edmund," Catherine said with practiced patience, "surely this incident demonstrates exactly why Isabel needs more structured supervision and professional guidance. If she had been properly trained in deportment and grace, she might not have fallen in the first place. William felt sick listening to Catherine blame the victim for the attack. But what appalled him more was seeing King Edmund nod thoughtfully, as if the twisted logic made sense to him. "You may be right," the king said slowly. "Perhaps a more controlled environment would be safer for her." William saw tears of betrayal and despair fill Princess Isabel's eyes as she realized her own father was being manipulated into sending her away, possibly forever. The girl was learning that sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones who fail you most completely. Marcus chose that moment to stir in his bed, his voice weak but determined. "Your Majesty, if I might have a word?" King Edmund approached the injured guard with genuine gratitude. "Marcus, thank God you were there. The physicians say Isabel might have been killed if you hadn't acted so quickly." "I did what any loyal guardian would do, Your Majesty. But I think you should know that what I witnessed was not an accident." The tension in the room became palpable as everyone processed this statement. Lady Catherine's face went very pale, then flushed with what appeared to be righteous indignation. "Captain Blackwood, I understand that you suffered a severe head injury yourself," she said carefully. "Perhaps your memories are also affected by the trauma." Marcus fixed her with a steady gaze that would have intimidated a lesser woman. "My memory is perfectly clear, my lady. I saw you deliberately push Princess Isabel down those stairs." "That's a serious accusation," King Edmund said, his voice troubled. "Marcus, you've served our family faithfully for decades, but accusing my wife of trying to harm my daughter is exactly what happened," Marcus said firmly. "Your Majesty, I understand this is difficult to accept, but your daughter's life is in danger. This was not the first attempt, and it won't be the last unless you take action." Lord Aldrich spoke for the first time since entering the room. "Uncle Edmund, perhaps we should consider that Captain Blackwood's injuries have affected his judgment. It's not uncommon for head trauma to cause paranoid delusions or false memories. Maybe it would be kindest to allow him to retire quietly rather than forcing him to make accusations he'll later regret." The manipulation was expertly done, William realized. Aldrich was providing the king with a face-saving way to dismiss Marcus's testimony, while simultaneously pushing for the loyal guard's removal from his position. "Father," Princess Isabel said quietly, "Marcus is telling the truth. Catherine pushed me." "Isabel, darling," Catherine's voice dripped with false sympathy, "you're still recovering from your head injury. These kinds of confused memories are very common with concussions. Dr. Ashworth can explain how trauma affects the mind." All eyes turned to the physician, who found herself at the center of a battle between truth and political expedience. Dr. Ashworth looked at Princess Isabel's pleading eyes, then at Marcus's steady gaze, then at the expectant faces of the people who held the power to destroy her career and livelihood. "Concussions can indeed affect memory," she said carefully. "But, in my medical opinion, both Princess Isabel and Captain Blackwood are lucid, and their memories of recent events appear to be intact." It was a brave stance that surprised everyone in the room, and William felt a surge of respect for the physician's courage. King Edmund rubbed his temples as if fighting a headache. "This is all very confusing. Catherine, the accusations against you are serious, but seemingly baseless. Marcus, your loyalty to my family is unquestioned, but your claims require evidence. Isabel, you're young and have been through trauma. What kind of evidence would convince you, Your Majesty?" William asked, stepping forward for the first time. "Sir William," Catherine said sharply, "this is a family matter that doesn't require input from subordinate guards." "Actually," William replied calmly, as acting captain of the guard, "investigating threats to the royal family is exactly my responsibility. And I've uncovered several pieces of evidence that support Captain Blackwood's account." Catherine's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the cold fury beneath her practiced charm. "What kind of evidence?" William pulled out a small leather portfolio. "Testimony from servants who witnessed the incident, records of Lady Catherine's unusual behavior in the days leading up to the ceremony, and financial records showing payments made to certain individuals who might have been expected to provide favorable testimony about the accident." Those are lies and fabrications, Aldrich snarled, his aristocratic composure finally cracking. You're listening to the gossip of servants and the paranoid fantasies of injured men. Then you won't mind if we conduct a formal investigation? William suggested mildly. If everyone is telling the truth, a thorough inquiry should clear up any confusion. King Edmund looked exhausted by the entire conversation. I need time to think about all this. For now, I want to increase security around Isabel, and I want both Catherine and Marcus to rest and recover while we sort through these allegations. Edmund, Catherine said with hurt in her voice, surely you don't believe I would harm your daughter? I love Isabel as if she were my own child. I don't know what to believe anymore, the king admitted, and William could see the toll that the conflicting loyalties were taking on him. I just want my family to be safe and for this nightmare to end. After the royal party left, William remained behind to speak privately with Marcus and Princess Isabel. The three of them represented the only people in the palace who were committed to uncovering the truth, regardless of the political consequences. We're running out of time, Marcus said quietly, his voice strained from his injuries but his mind sharp. Catherine knows we're on her now, and she'll accelerate her plans. If Isabel is sent away to that school, she'll be completely vulnerable. What can we do? Isabel asked, her young voice carrying a maturity born of harsh experience. No one believes us, and even Father seems to think we're confused or lying. William sat down beside her bed. Your Highness, we have to find proof that even your father can't dismiss or explain away. Catherine has been careful, but people like her always make mistakes when they're under pressure. What kind of mistakes? Marcus asked. The kind that desperate people make when their original plans fail, William replied grimly. She tried to kill you once and failed. She tried to discredit our testimony and partially failed. Now she's going to try something more direct, and that's when we'll catch her. Princess Isabel shivered despite the warm blankets. You mean she's going to try again? Almost certainly, Marcus said honestly. But this time we'll be ready for her. As night fell over Aldermere Palace, three people began planning their own strategy to counter Lady Catherine's murderous ambitions. They knew they were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and running out of time. But they also knew that sometimes the most dangerous opponents were those with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. In another part of the palace, Catherine and Aldrich were having their own planning session, and their conversation would have chilled the blood of anyone who overheard it. The battle for Princess Isabel's life and the future of the kingdom was entering its most dangerous phase. The conspiracy that was unfolding in the east wing of Aldermere Palace would have made the ancient stones themselves weep if they could have understood the depth of betrayal being planned within their walls. Lady Catherine paced before the fireplace in Lord Aldrich's chambers, her elegant composure finally cracking under the pressure of failed schemes and mounting opposition. That interfering guard has ruined everything, she hissed, her beautiful face twisted with rage. And now his puppy William thinks he can investigate me like some common criminal. Lord Aldrich Moregrave lounged in a velvet chair, a goblet of wine in his hand and murder in his eyes. Perhaps it's time to stop being subtle, dear aunt. Accidents can be arranged for guards as easily as for princesses. Don't be a fool, Catherine snapped. If anything happens to Blackwood or Hartwell now, even Edmund will see the connection. We need to be smarter than that. Then what you propose? The girl is still alive, she's still heir to the throne, and now she has protectors who are actively working against us. Catherine stopped pacing and turned to face her nephew with a smile that would have made the devil himself uncomfortable. We accelerate the timeline. The boarding school plan was always meant to be temporary, a way to isolate her before the final solution. But if we can't remove her from the palace safely, then we'll have to implement the final solution here. What are you talking about? Think about it, Aldrich. A traumatized young girl, still recovering from a terrible accident, overwhelmed by the stress of palace life and the fear that someone is trying to hurt her. She becomes increasingly unstable, paranoid, prone to fits of hysteria. And then, tragically, she takes her own life. Aldrich's eyes widened with understanding and admiration. Suicide. No one to blame, no investigation needed. Just a terrible tragedy that removes the obstacle permanently. Exactly. And who would question it? She's already claiming that people are trying to kill her. Clearly the signs of a disturbed mind. A few more incidents to establish her mental instability, some carefully planted evidence of her despair, and then, how do we make it look convincing? Catherine moved to her writing desk and pulled out a piece of parchment. We forge a note in her handwriting. Something about feeling hopeless, being afraid all the time, not wanting to be a burden to her father. Then, we arrange for her to be found in her chambers, having taken a fatal dose of sleeping draught. And if the physician suspects poison, Dr. Ashworth won't be examining the body, Catherine said coldly. I'll ensure that a more cooperative physician handles the death investigation. Someone who understands the importance of political stability over inconvenient questions. As the two conspirators refined their murderous plan, they were unaware that someone else was listening to every word. Young Thomas, the page who had witnessed Catherine push Princess Isabel, had been assigned to tend the fire in Lord Aldrich's chambers. His small size and servant's invisibility had allowed him to overhear the entire conversation while he worked. Thomas felt sick with horror as he realized what he had heard. These people were planning to murder Princess Isabel and make it look like suicide. But who would believe a lowly page? And, more importantly, who could he tell without signing his own death warrant? Meanwhile, in the infirmary, William was conducting his own investigation with the help of Dr. Ashworth. The physician had decided that her oath to protect life superseded any political considerations, and she was using her medical knowledge to help build a case against Lady Catherine. Look at this, Dr. Ashworth said, showing William a detailed drawing of Princess Isabel's injuries. The pattern of bruising on her back is consistent with being pushed forcefully by someone's hands. These marks on her shoulder blades match what you'd expect from someone shoving her from behind. Can you testify to that in an official inquiry? William asked. I can and I will, regardless of the consequences, the doctor replied firmly. But we need more than medical evidence. We need witnesses' documentation, something that proves premeditation. Marcus, who was recovering more quickly than expected due to his excellent physical condition, had been thinking along the same lines. William, I want you to search Catherine's chambers. If she's been planning this for months, there might be correspondence, financial records, something that shows the conspiracy. I can't search the Queen's chambers without a direct order from the King, William protested. The political ramifications would be enormous. Then, we need to force her hand, Princess Isabel said quietly. All eyes turned to the young girl, who had been listening to their conversation with the intense focus of someone whose life depended on understanding every nuance. What do you mean, Your Highness? Dr. Ashworth asked gently. If Catherine is planning something else, we need to make her act quickly and carelessly. People make mistakes when they're desperate or angry. Marcus studied the princess with newfound respect. That's very dangerous thinking, Isabel. Using yourself as bait could get you killed. I'm going to be killed anyway if we don't stop her, the girl replied with heartbreaking pragmatism. At least this way, we might be able to catch her in the act and prove what she's really doing. Their planning was interrupted by Thomas bursting into the infirmary, his face pale with terror and excitement. Sir William, he gasped, I have to tell you something, but please, you have to promise to protect me and my family. William immediately recognized the boy as one of the servants who had witnessed the staircase incident. Thomas, what's wrong? What did you see? Between gasps for breath, Thomas told them everything he had overheard in Lord Aldrich's chambers. The room fell silent as the full scope of Catherine's plan became clear. They're going to make it look like suicide, Marcus said grimly. That's actually brilliant from a strategic standpoint. No investigation, no questions, just a tragic end to a traumatized young girl. How long do we have? William asked Thomas. They said something about needing to establish her mental instability first, then acting within the next few days. Lady Catherine mentioned something about getting a different physician to examine the body. Dr. Ashworth's face went white with understanding. They're planning to eliminate me from the equation as well. If I'm not available to perform the examination, they can bring in someone who will support their version of events. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, revealing a conspiracy more comprehensive and ruthless than any of them had imagined. Catherine wasn't just planning to kill Princess Isabel. She was planning to destroy anyone who might interfere with her version of events. "We have to go to the king immediately," William said. This testimony about their overheard conversation, combined with the medical evidence and the witness statements, should be enough to convince him. "Should be," Marcus agreed, but Catherine has had 2 years to work on Edmund's mind. She's convinced him that she loves Isabel like her own daughter. He may still refuse to believe it. Princess Isabel stood up from her bed, ignoring Dr. Ashworth's protests about her need for rest. "Then we make sure he has no choice but to believe it. Thomas, can you get back to your duties without arousing suspicion?" The page nodded nervously. "I think so, Your Highness. They didn't seem to notice me." "Good. I want you to continue serving in that area and report back to us about any other conversations you might overhear. But be very careful. If they discover you're spying, they'll kill you without hesitation." Thomas swallowed hard but nodded his agreement. The boy was risking everything to protect his future queen, and everyone in the room understood the courage that required. "What about the rest of us?" Dr. Ashworth asked. "If they're planning to eliminate me as well, I need to take precautions." Marcus struggled to sit up despite his injuries. "William, I want you to arrange for trusted guards to escort Dr. Ashworth at all times. And I want someone watching Catherine and Aldrich around the clock. If they're going to act soon, we need to be ready." "What about Princess Isabel's protection?" William asked. "That's where our plan gets dangerous," Isabel said, her young voice carrying a determination that impressed and terrified the adults around her. "We're going to give Catherine exactly what she wants. An opportunity to attack me when she thinks I'm vulnerable." "Absolutely not," Marcus said firmly. "I will not allow you to put yourself in that kind of danger." "Marcus, you said yourself that she's going to try again no matter what we do. At least this way, we can control the circumstances and be ready for her." Dr. Ashworth looked troubled. "Your Highness, the risks are enormous. If something goes wrong, if we're not fast enough, or if she uses a method we don't anticipate, then I'll be dead," Isabel finished calmly. "But I'll be dead anyway if we don't stop her. This way, at least we have a chance to save the kingdom from her influence." The room fell quiet as everyone grappled with the impossible choice facing them. They could try to protect Princess Isabel through conventional means and likely fail when Catherine struck at a time and place of her choosing. Or they could gamble everything on a dangerous plan that might save the girl's life and expose the conspiracy, but could just as easily result in her death. "If we do this," Marcus said slowly, "we need to plan every detail perfectly. One mistake, one moment of inattention, and we lose everything." "I understand," Isabel replied, "but I'd rather die fighting than hide in fear while my kingdom is stolen from me." Over the next several hours, they developed their plan. It was risky, complex, and dependent on timing that would have to be perfect. But as they worked through the details, each of them began to feel something they hadn't experienced since this nightmare began: hope. Lady Catherine had the advantage of position, resources, and ruthless determination. But Princess Isabel had something more powerful on her side: people who were willing to die to protect her, and the kind of courage that came from knowing she was fighting not just for her own life, but for the soul of her kingdom. The final battle was about to begin, and only one side could emerge victorious. In the shadows of Aldermere Palace, loyalty and treachery prepared for their ultimate confrontation, with the fate of a 12-year-old girl hanging in the balance. As night fell, Catherine and Aldrich finalized their murderous plan, unaware that their every move was being watched and their every word reported. The hunters had become the hunted, but they didn't know it yet. Tomorrow would bring the resolution that everyone had been building towards since that fateful morning when Catherine first set her sights on removing Princess Isabel from her path to power. Either justice would prevail or evil would triumph, and the kingdom would live with the consequences for generations to come. The dawn that would determine the fate of Princess Isabel and the kingdom of Aldermere broke gray and cold, with storm clouds gathering on the horizon like omens of the confrontation to come. In the infirmary, the conspirators made their final preparations for what they all knew would be their only chance to expose Lady Catherine's murderous plot. Princess Isabel sat quietly as Dr. Ashworth applied a special mixture to her skin that would make her appear pale and sickly, part of their plan to convince Catherine that her psychological warfare was working. The 12-year-old girl who had learned to carry the weight of a kingdom on her shoulders looked far too young to be orchestrating such a dangerous gambit, but her eyes held the steely determination of someone who had already lost everything that could be taken from her except her life. "Remember," Marcus said, his voice still weak from his injuries, but his mind sharp with tactical planning, "Catherine will likely try to isolate you before making her move. Don't go anywhere alone with her, no matter what reason she gives. If she insists, that's when you'll know the attack is imminent." William checked his pocket watch nervously. "Thomas should be in position by now, and I have trusted guards stationed throughout the palace. But once this starts, everything will happen very quickly." "What if something goes wrong?" Dr. Ashworth asked, voicing the fear they all shared. "What if Catherine realizes it's a trap? Or what if she decides to act differently than we've anticipated?" Isabel stood up, smoothing down her dress with hands that trembled only slightly. "Then we'll adapt. But we can't let fear paralyze us. My mother died protecting me before I was even born, and Marcus nearly died protecting me 3 days ago. I won't let their sacrifices be meaningless." The first part of their plan involved making Princess Isabel appear increasingly unstable and vulnerable, exactly the psychological state that Catherine needed to establish before implementing her fake suicide scenario. Isabel would spend the morning acting nervous, jumping at sudden sounds, and making comments about feeling unsafe in the palace. The goal was to make Catherine believe her psychological campaign was succeeding and that the princess was ripe for the final manipulation. As Isabel made her way to the morning meal, accompanied by William at a discreet distance, she began her performance. She paused at doorways as if afraid to enter rooms, glanced over her shoulder as if being followed, and spoke in the quiet, hesitant voice of someone whose confidence had been shattered. King Edmund noticed the change in his daughter immediately. "Isabel, you look pale this morning. Are you feeling well?" "I'm fine, father," she replied softly, then added with perfect timing, "I just had trouble sleeping. I keep having nightmares about falling down those stairs, and sometimes I dream that someone is in my room watching me." Lady Catherine's eyes sharpened with interest as she recognized the opening she had been waiting for. "Poor darling, trauma can affect people in so many ways. Perhaps you should speak with someone about these disturbing dreams." "I've been thinking," Isabel continued, her voice barely above a whisper, "maybe it would be better if I did go away to school. Sometimes I feel like I'm bringing danger to everyone around me, and I don't want anyone else to get hurt because of me." Marcus, who was watching from his position near the servants' entrance, saw Catherine's lips curve in a subtle smile of satisfaction. The bait was being taken exactly as they had hoped. "Nonsense, sweetheart," King Edmund said with paternal concern. "You're not bringing danger to anyone. You're safe here, surrounded by people who love you." "But what if I'm not?" Isabel asked, and the genuine fear in her voice made her performance all the more convincing. "What if someone really is trying to hurt me, and being near me puts other people in danger?" Catherine leaned forward with false sympathy. "Isabel, these kinds of paranoid thoughts are very concerning. Perhaps you should rest today, and I could sit with you for a while. Sometimes talking through our fears can help us put them in perspective." "Would you?" Isabel asked with apparent gratitude. "I would feel so much safer if you were there." The trap was set. Catherine had just volunteered to spend time alone with Isabel under circumstances that would provide perfect cover for implementing her fake suicide plan. All they had to do now was wait for her to make her move. After breakfast, Catherine suggested that Princess Isabel rest in her chambers while she attended to some correspondence. The separation would give Catherine time to prepare whatever method she intended to use, while allowing Isabel to position herself for the confrontation. William escorted the princess to her rooms, using the opportunity to make final adjustments to their security arrangements. "Remember," he whispered as they walked, "we'll be listening from the adjoining chamber, but we can't intervene too early or she might claim she was only trying to help you feel better." "I understand," Isabel replied quietly. "I need to let her reveal her true intentions before you can act." In her chambers, Princess Isabel settled into the window seat where she often read, positioning herself where she could be easily observed but also where she would have multiple escape routes if needed. The waiting was the hardest part, knowing that somewhere in the palace, Lady Catherine was preparing to attempt murder while planning to make it look like suicide. Thomas, meanwhile, was maintaining his surveillance of Lord Aldrich's chambers. The page had become an invaluable intelligence asset, but his position was becoming increasingly dangerous as the conspiracy moved toward its climax. When he saw Lady Catherine enter Aldrich's rooms carrying a small vial of clear liquid, he knew the final phase was about to begin. "It's a concentrated sleeping draught," Catherine explained to her nephew. "Tasteless in wine or tea, and it will simulate the effects of an intentional overdose. The girl will simply drift off to sleep and never wake up. And you're certain no one will suspect?" Aldrich asked. "Who would?" "She's been exhibiting all the signs of psychological distress. She's spoken about feeling unsafe, and she's expressed guilt about endangering others. The suicide note I've prepared explains that she couldn't bear the burden of being heir to the throne and chose to end her suffering." "What about the guards who have been protecting her?" Catherine's smile turned predatory. "They'll be devastated that they failed to prevent such a tragedy. Marcus Blackwood will blame himself for not recognizing the signs, and William Hartwell will be removed from his position for allowing it to happen under his watch. With them gone and Isabel dead, Edmund will be completely dependent on me for guidance and support." Thomas crept closer to hear more details about the timing of the attack, but his movement caught Aldrich's attention. "Who's there?" the Lord demanded, rising from his chair. The page realized he had been discovered and ran for the door, but Aldrich was faster. Strong hands grabbed Thomas and dragged him back into the room, where Catherine's face went white with rage as she recognized the boy who could destroy everything. "You little spy," she hissed. "How much did you hear?" Thomas tried to lie, but the terror in his eyes gave him away. Catherine looked at Aldrich with cold determination. "Kill him. Make it look like an accident." "No, wait," Thomas gasped. "Please, I won't tell anyone, I swear." But his pleas were cut short as Aldrich's hands closed around his throat. The brave page who had risked everything to protect his future queen died, knowing he had done his duty, even as he prayed that his sacrifice would not be in vain. Catherine looked down at the boy's body with no emotion except annoyance at the inconvenience. "Get rid of him. Make it look like he fell down some stairs or something equally mundane. And then we proceed with the princess immediately. We can't risk any more delays or discoveries." As Aldrich disposed of Thomas's body, Catherine prepared for her final confrontation with Princess Isabel. She arranged her features into an expression of maternal concern, practiced the caring words she would use to gain the girl's trust, and concealed the vial of poison in the folds of her dress. In her chambers, Princess Isabel felt a strange sense of calm descending over her as she waited for Catherine's arrival. She thought about her mother, whom she had never really known but whose love she had felt throughout her life. She thought about Marcus, lying injured because he had kept his promise to protect her. She thought about William and Dr. Ashworth and even poor Thomas, all of whom were risking everything to help her survive. When a knock came at her door, Isabel took a deep breath and called for her visitor to enter. Lady Catherine swept into the room carrying a tea service, her face arranged in an expression of loving concern that would have fooled anyone who didn't know her true nature. "I thought you might enjoy some chamomile tea, darling. It's very soothing for frayed nerves." That's very kind of you, Isabel replied, accepting the cup with hands that shook slightly. Whether from genuine fear or continued performance, she wasn't entirely sure. I've been thinking about our conversation this morning, Catherine said, settling into the chair across from Isabel. Your concerns about bringing danger to others are very mature, but perhaps misplaced. What do you mean? Catherine's voice took on the hypnotic quality of a skilled manipulator. Sometimes when we feel overwhelmed by responsibility, the kindest thing we can do for everyone is to remove that burden entirely. Your father has already lost one wife to the demands of royal life. Imagine how much easier things would be for him if he didn't have to worry about your safety constantly. Isabel's blood ran cold as she realized Catherine was already beginning the psychological manipulation that would culminate in her murder. I suppose you're right. Sometimes I do feel like more of a burden than a blessing. Exactly, Catherine said, her eyes lighting up with satisfaction. And the guilt you must feel about Captain Blackwood's injuries, knowing that he was hurt because you needed protecting, that must be almost unbearable. It is, Isabel whispered, and this time the emotion in her voice was completely genuine. I keep thinking that if I weren't here, he would be safe. Catherine leaned forward, sensing that her victim was fully engaged in the emotional trap she was weaving. You know, darling, sometimes the most courageous thing a person can do is to choose peace over struggle, to let go of burdens that are too heavy to carry. In the adjoining chamber, William and Dr. Ashworth listened with growing horror as Catherine essentially coached Princess Isabel towards suicide. The woman's manipulation skills were more sophisticated and more evil than they had imagined. Drink your tea, dear, Catherine said gently. It will help you think more clearly about your options. Princess Isabel lifted the cup toward her lips, then paused. Catherine, can I ask you something? Of course, darling. Do you think my mother would have wanted me to give up? When things got difficult, would she have chosen to just let go? Catherine's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the cold calculation beneath. Your mother is gone, Isabel. You can't live your life trying to please a ghost. It was exactly the wrong thing to say, and Catherine realized her mistake immediately. But it was too late. Princess Isabel now knew with absolute certainty that this woman felt nothing but contempt for the memory of Queen Isabella and everything she had represented. You're right, Isabel said quietly, setting down the teacup without drinking from it. I can't live my life trying to please a ghost, but I can live it trying to honor the woman who gave everything to bring me into this world. Catherine's face hardened as she realized her psychological manipulation had failed. Drink the tea, Isabel. I don't think I will. Thank you. I said drink the tea. Catherine's voice had lost all pretense of warmth or caring. And I said no. Princess Isabel stood up, her young voice ringing with newfound authority. In fact, I think our conversation is over. Catherine rose as well, her hand moving toward the vial of poison concealed in her dress. If she couldn't convince the girl to take it voluntarily, she would have to force it down her throat. But as she moved toward Isabel, the doors to the chamber burst open and William entered with Dr. Ashworth and several guards. Lady Catherine, William said formally, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted assassination of Princess Isabel, and treason against the crown. Catherine's beautiful face transformed into something ugly and vicious as her carefully constructed persona finally shattered completely. You interfering fools. Do you have any idea what you've done? This kingdom needs strong leadership, not a weak child who will be manipulated by every advisor and petitioner who crosses her path. The kingdom needs its rightful heir, Dr. Ashworth said firmly, not a murderess who would kill a child to steal a crown that was never meant for her. As the guards moved to restrain Catherine, she made one last desperate attempt to complete her mission. She lunged toward Princess Isabel with the vial of poison, intending to force it down the girl's throat, even if it meant revealing her guilt to everyone present. But Marcus Blackwood, despite his injuries, had been waiting in the hallway for exactly this moment. He threw himself between Catherine and the princess, taking the full force of her attack and sending the vial of poison crashing to the floor where its deadly contents spread harmlessly across the stones. "It's over," Marcus said quietly as the guards finally secured Catherine. "Your reign of terror ends here." King Edmund arrived moments later, having been summoned by William's messengers. The king's face was a mask of devastation as he took in the scene. His wife under arrest, his daughter safe but traumatized, and the loyal guard who had once again risked everything to protect his family. "Catherine," he said, his voice broken with grief and betrayal, "how could you?" She looked at him with pure hatred. "How could I? How could you be so blind? Your precious daughter would have destroyed everything we could have built together. The kingdom deserves better than a weak little girl who cries about her dead mother and hides behind her guards." It was the final confirmation that Edmund needed. His wife, the woman he had trusted with his heart and his kingdom, had been planning to murder his child. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that he aged years in the span of moments. "Take her away," he said quietly, "and send word to Lord Aldrich that he is also under arrest for treason." As Catherine was led from the chamber in chains, she turned back for one last venomous statement. "You think you've won, but you've only delayed the inevitable. That child will never be strong enough to rule. And when she falls, remember that you could have prevented it by letting me spare her the burden." After she was gone, the room fell silent except for the sound of King Edmund weeping for the family he thought he had built and the trust that had been so completely shattered. Princess Isabel approached her father with tears in her own eyes. "Father, I'm so sorry. I know you loved her." Edmund pulled his daughter into his arms, holding her as if he would never let her go again. "I love the woman I thought she was, but that woman never existed. You, Isabel, are real. You are brave and kind and everything your mother was. I failed to protect you from someone who should have been your greatest protector, but I will never make that mistake again." Marcus watched the reunion between father and daughter with deep satisfaction, despite the pain from his injuries. His oath had been kept, his promise fulfilled. Princess Isabel was safe, the conspiracy had been exposed, and the kingdom would survive. Later that evening, as the palace struggled to process the revelations of the day, Princess Isabel sat beside Marcus in the infirmary. "I heard about Thomas," she said quietly. "He died protecting me, didn't he?" "He died doing his duty," Marcus replied, "just like any good soldier. When I'm queen, I want to build a monument to him, and to all the people who risk their lives to protect others, even when they're not wearing uniforms or carrying swords." Marcus smiled, seeing in this 12-year-old girl the wisdom and compassion that would make her a great ruler someday. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Your Highness." "Marcus, you've protected me my whole life. You nearly died for me twice in 1 week. How can I ever repay that?" The old guard considered the question seriously. "Become the queen your mother would have been proud of. Rule with wisdom, lead with compassion, and never forget that the greatest strength comes from knowing who you can trust." As night fell over Aldermere Palace, the kingdom began to heal from the wounds inflicted by Lady Catherine's ambitions. Justice would be served, reforms would be implemented to prevent future conspiracies, and Princess Isabel would continue her education with the hard-won knowledge that sometimes the people closest to you are the most dangerous enemies of all. The grand staircase where it all began would be remembered not as the site of a successful assassination, but as the place where loyalty triumphed over treachery and where a brave man's promise to protect an innocent child changed the course of history. In years to come, when Queen Isabel ruled the kingdom with wisdom and grace, she would often think of the morning when everything changed, when Captain Marcus Blackwood dove down 100 marble steps to catch a falling princess, and, in doing so, caught the future of the kingdom itself. The story of the royal guard sacrifice would be told for generations, a reminder that true nobility is not measured by birth or title, but by the willingness to risk everything for those who cannot protect themselves. And in the palace gardens, beneath the monument to Thomas the Page and all the unsung heroes who had given their lives in service to others, Visitors would read the inscription chosen by Queen Isabel herself. Courage is not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. Honor is not the absence of temptation, but loyalty in spite of it. Love is not the absence of cost, but sacrifice in spite of it. The kingdom of Aldermere had been saved by people who understood these truths, and it would endure because of the lessons they had taught through their example.